Welcome to the Mimitoys and Puppets Ireland video podcast, learning through different voices and different eyes. In this series of video podcasts, I focus on learning, parenting, and education. Today, I'll have a chat with Eimear O'Reilly, who is a play therapist, and you're based in County Dublin. And Eimear, thank you very much, first of all, for being here, and I'm so much looking forward to having a chat with you. The first question I'd like to ask Eimear is, what is a play therapist?
Thanks, Val. So play therapy is a psychotherapeutic intervention. It can be really helpful for children who've maybe experienced something traumatic, children who are anxious. It can help with bullying, whether it's the child is the perpetrator or the victim, anger, behavior concerns. It can really be good for neurodivergent children as well. So it can help with autism, OCD, various neurodiverse diagnosis, abuse, children in care. So there's quite a wide range, and there's a lot of play therapists going to a lot of different niches. But generally it would be for children aged 3 years and up. So I personally would work up to the age of maybe 14, 15 at the oldest. Older than that, and I'd be recommending more, talk therapy, psychotherapy, CBT. And they can all be useful for children too. Whereas play therapy is play is the language of the child. And so it's a really safe environment. It's very child-led. The child gets to come in and pick what they're going to do in any session, and then the therapist rolls with whatever activity or game that is, and then they make that therapeutic. So you really reduce the risk of triggering a child, which is really important, especially if the child's experienced trauma. So that's kind of, for me, that's the beauty of play therapy, that it's very child-centered. The child has a lot of control in the sessions, and it can move quite slowly at the start, which I think a lot of children need, to that time to develop trust with the therapist, develop the therapeutic relationship before they get into the trauma or whatever's happened, whatever's going on. I suppose while all that's going on, the weekly sessions with the child, we're also, constantly in contact with the parents. Some parents might do a monthly parent support session where we work on a psychoeducation or parenting issue or concern, or something the parent wants to learn more about. So I could do specific sessions on that. And then not everybody would do that. Other parents I might just see every 2 months for a review. And we kind of just check in, give them feedback. Yeah.
Just a question, because I know obviously play therapy, you use the word play, which is really the essence of what children do naturally and reasonably easily. So how does it come? Well, how easy is it to get results, if I may say, using play when you have to deal with what you've described, various traumas or behavioral issues, anxieties, etc. So how easy is it to use that natural thing that children have?
So it's an interesting question. So sometimes a therapist might be very non-directive in favor with the child. So that's where the child is sort of going into their own play, imaginary world, and the therapist can analyze that and see, what's going on, how are they interacting with the toys, how are they interacting with the dolls or puppets, are they releasing anger or frustration, and you can reflect back to the child, which helps them reflect on their own behaviors and feelings. So that's kind of one way, just reflecting to the child, and that's very open-ended. And in those sessions, the child can bring the play wherever they want. It might be, sword fighting as well, Nerf guns, things like that for releasing tension. And so the child is engaged in play, but doesn't even realize that they're releasing, feelings that they've been internalizing. So again, it's a very safe way for children to express themselves, because it's fun as well and they want to engage in it. And then for other children, it might be more a directive approach. So if they're here to process a specific thing like, grief or loss or an accident or medical trauma, once the initial phase of therapy, the child trusts the therapist, once you're at that phase, we might introduce more directive techniques where we, might discuss what's happened, or we'd ask a child, to use paint or color to express a certain feeling, or we might make masks, things like that. So there's kind of always a balance between the non-directive and the child kind of going into their own play world, and us, the therapist, using that and analyzing that and reflecting what they're seeing to the child. And then also, as time goes on, introducing more directive activities and techniques, all through toys or play. Art is a big part of it.
I suppose it sounds really ideal for the younger children that may not have the words to express various things that they're going through. So
yeah, especially if it's something complex like parents separating as well. For children, that can be really hard to put words on, whereas through art or play it's easier to get out. It's more tolerable for the child. And then the other thing we do a lot of in the playroom is, I suppose, nervous system regulation. So if the child has experienced trauma, or if they're anxious or angry, often there's some kind of imbalance in the nervous system where they're being triggered easily and quick to anger or quick to go into panic and anxiety. So in all the sessions, we'd have a focus on games, especially when we check in and before we leave the play therapy room, where we might use bubbles for breathing. Again, the child might realize that that's helping them calm the system, but it really works. So blowing really big bubbles, blowing up balloons, imagining our big feelings in the balloon that we've been holding on to, and then letting the balloon go and fly around the room, and leaving that stuff with the therapist, so they don't need to bring that baggage home with them. So every session, it's a lot of nervous system regulation, and clay, messy play, slime, all of that is really good for soothing the nervous system as well.
Very sensory as well.
Very sensory, and you go back to, the children often go back to an earlier developmental phase, even teenagers, 12-year-olds. It's as if they're 4 again, and they're really exploring the world through their senses, and it can, I suppose, fulfill an unmet need at that stage of attachment to development as well.
That's fascinating, Eimear. Just I was wondering, are parents involved in the sessions, let's say with the younger children, or not?
So the way I work with play therapy, the first couple of sessions, especially with the younger child, and if they're having difficulty separating from the parents obviously invited in. We always make sure the child is comfortable, and I'll say to the child, whenever you're ready, you can ask mum to go and get a coffee, or and she'll be back in 40 minutes, and we leave it that way. We let the child decide when they're ready for the parent to leave, which gives them more autonomy and control and a sense of safety. But for some children, it might take a couple of sessions to slowly separate and move the parent out of the room. But there is another type of child therapy called theraplay, and that
I like the sound of that.
Theraplay. So it's where the parent and the therapist and child would always be together, and they really work on attachment and bonding, and helping the parent learn how to play with the child and process together. So it's a different field, really, but also really interesting. So there's lots of different types of therapy, and it really depends on what the main concern or goal is.
Exactly, and that's leading to my next question, Eimear. As a parent, sometimes you wonder what is the best approach, and there is counseling or psychotherapy, play therapy, CBT. So how, if you were to give some tips to a parent, what would be the criteria of selecting the hopefully the right therapy to help a child?
Yeah, so definitely to look on accredited registers. So for play therapy, that would be Play Therapy Ireland, or IHIP, IAHIP, IACPT. There's loads of different accrediting bodies, and on their websites, they all have a register. So to make sure that your therapist is fully qualified and to do the work, that's, I suppose, number one. Always to ring around a couple of different people. Most therapists will do like an initial 15-20 minute free chat, so just to get a feel for the therapist. I definitely encourage parents to pick therapists who are child-led and child-focus centered, just because that really reduces the risk of triggering or traumatizing a child, because it is quite delicate work. So bearing that in mind, but again, it's with the different fields, whether it's psychotherapy, talk therapy, CBT, just to ring around and educate yourself, and see what's best fit for you, because it's very individual. You know, and
Absolutely.
it's interesting. Some parents ring me and they're like, "Oh, he's 10 and he doesn't really play anymore. Will he get it? Will he be able to do it?" Absolutely. And often part of the work is teaching the child how to express themselves through play again.
Yeah.
If they've kind of lost that, or maybe they spend a lot of time on devices, or for whatever reason they're not really using toys anymore.
Mm.
Slowly in the playroom, we can reintroduce that imagination and playfulness,
Yeah.
which is just great stress relief for kids,
Absolutely. And even I think the physicality of moving, playing with things, because I was thinking younger teenagers and even adults, sometimes your head is empty, is tired, you don't have the words, but you can still handle stuff. So that's
Exactly.
really,
And
really interesting.
if we're, in the grip of fear or anger, you know yourself when you're really tense and you're in the moment and you're, behaving out of character, you're not able to find the words. You're not able to express yourself, in a coherent way. Whereas through play, you can.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
well,
it's
that's
very
cool.
interesting.
And talking
Very
about
metaphor.
websites, yeah, I was on your website, Eimear, and you have a lot of different videos now. So it's within play
Mm,
therapy, but really interesting videos about sun therapy and using clay
mm,
as well. And I forgot, but there was another one really, really interesting. Also for parents who are looking, it's great that you have all that information on your website, and also to give an idea of all the different techniques that you use within play therapy. So I know there is play therapy and there is also creative arts and creative therapy. So can you just tell me
yeah.
a little bit what you do in? Yes.
Sure. So most play therapists will have art materials like paint, clay, stuff for making slime or dough, crayons, all the different types of art materials, all open-ended materials as well. So they're all there, and the child gets to kind of go and explore them, pick what they want to do. So like clay, for example, is very grounding, and using both your hands to manipulate it,
Mm.
you're using both hemispheres in the brain, and it really, soothes the system. And it can actually produce brain waves that are normally only produced in meditation or in deep sleep. So that's a new exciting discovery. So obviously for children, it's really hard for them to meditate, whereas through play we can get those
Mm.
same brain waves going, really help them soothe, and it can be cathartic too. We can squeeze it, we can slap it
Mm.
off the table, we can
Absolutely.
twist it, really exploring it. So I suppose with clay or paint, any of the creative mediums we use, it's more about the process of exploring and expressing rather than the end product.
Mm.
Um, I don't know if that answers your question.
Absolutely answers my
Yeah,
question. The other one
yeah,
I found fascinating was the sand play therapy, which is
yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, I love sand play therapy
Yeah.
as well. So, like that in the room, we'd have the art materials, puppets, sand play miniatures, which I'll show you a few of now, and a sandbox, as well as a doll's house, dolls, lots of fidgets as well for soothing. So the child gets to pick what they want to do, and if they're doing sand play, so we'd have lots and lots of different miniature toys,
Yeah.
kind of realistic ones. So like there's a crocodile or a wolf.
Yeah.
So like we'd have wild animals, domesticated animals, things like trees and for making rivers or lakes, little stones, fantasy symbols like witches and wizards, dragons, people, trying to think what else. Like basically a broad range that children can make whatever small world they
Okay.
want in the
Yeah.
sand. And the sand play therapist, analyzes where the child is putting what animals or creatures, how they're interacting. And each, animal or figure has a deep symbolic meaning. So we can sort of see what part of themselves are they trying
Okay.
to, show or express. What parts there might be some inner conflict in the tray, or danger areas and things that they're avoiding, things hiding in the
Mm.
sand, concealing things in the sand. And as the weeks go on, often what happens is the play, it's the same sort of sand tray every week, but it's like a sequence, so a series, and it continues every week. And there's maybe new miniatures in it, or something's not there anymore, and you're kind of wondering, oh well, where did that go? Is that something that's been processed? You can reflect to the child too, like, oh, I see this character here is a bit angry, I wonder what he's angry about. And then the
Mm.
child can
Yeah.
project their own anger onto the character or animal. And again, it's just a much more tolerable way for them to talk about feelings.
Yeah.
If you directly ask a child about their anger or about their big feelings, they often clam up and they don't want to talk about it. Whereas there's a much more age appropriate way of dealing with that.
That's brilliant, Eimear. And just as I was listening to you there, so as you watch a child playing, there is a lot of stuff going on in your mind, and I'm sure a lot of processing, analyzing, and everything. So,
yeah,
what led you to play therapy, and maybe tell us, the curriculum, what it takes to be a play therapist in Ireland.
sure. So I've taken a lot of side steps. Um, Initially, I was training as a nurse. I did nearly 2 years of nursing training, and it just wasn't for me. So I left that, and then I went into early childhood education. So I did a degree in that, and through that, I was working in a community childcare service, a non-profit in West Dublin. I was there maybe 5 years in the end, I think. And there's a lot. It's an under-resourced area. A lot of unemployment. But it was affordable, low-cost childcare for local families. And most of the women working there were locals that were trained in as childcare professionals as well. So it was a really lovely place to work. But in that area, I really realized there's such a shortage of mental health professionals for children. The waiting list for assessments of need to see a psychologist, OT, and play therapy through the HSE, really, really long and slow. And I kind of realized then working there that early intervention is the key, really, to work on issues as they come up in childhood so that, they don't grow into teenagers or adults and bring that stuff with them. It's like early intervention in mental health that, really reduces psychiatric disorders later in life, improves employability, so there's a lot of pros to seeking help early and getting help early. So I left there and I actually moved to Spain, and I was teaching English in Spain. And I just happened to end up home tutoring a little boy who had leukemia. So I was in his house twice a week teaching him English and one-to-one. And it was quite a therapeutic sort of hour with him, twice weekly. And it was working with him that I kind of realized, this is something I'm really enjoying. And I researched play therapy, came home and registered for the course. So really it was him who set me on my journey. So yeah, there's a couple of different places you can train. I trained with the Academy of Play and Child Psychotherapy. So they run courses out of Dublin and Galway. And the way it works is you do a certificate in therapeutic play, postgrad certificate, and then you do a postgrad certificate in play therapy. So once you have the diploma in play therapy, then you're qualified to practice. Obviously there's a lot of clinical hours involved. You need X amount of clinical hours before you're accredited and certified. So it is slow. It takes about 4 years postgrad. So it's a big commitment, but really worth it. It's the best thing
I can see with the smile, the way you speak about the whole thing. It's even though I'm sure you're hearing and you're observing a lot of traumas and difficult situations, but the smile says it all. You're really enjoying it, and I think it's a caring. I mean, you have a caring. There is something about caring about people and feeling what people feel.
And it's interesting too. Like even my short time in the nursing, college, I still have a big interest in human biology and the neurobiology of the brain, and neurology is a huge part of play therapy as well, because a lot of it is the physical brain chemistry and how to soothe the nervous system and all of that. So it's quite scientifically grounded as well, which I like. But I have a couple of things here. So with puppets, for example, I might, I'd have real stethoscopes.
You see on your Instagram, you had an injured puppet or a puppet with a brain injury.
Exactly.
Or something like that.
Yeah. So, so that was Ernie. So
Yeah, I noticed
Really,
that.
you can
Yeah.
only put your hand in to his mouth this way. But because he has this hole in here,
Yeah.
I have like a miniature brain in the room, and he ended up somebody put the brain in there, and
Yeah, that's what I thought I saw, and I said, "Oh, geez, what happened
yeah.
to her?"
So, and that's the
Yeah,
beauty of non-directive play,
yeah,
that a child can bring the play where they want it to go. Or like I've got a real blood pressure monitor as well, which is
yeah,
great fun to put on the puppets. And so for children who've experienced medical trauma, they can act out what's been done to them,
exactly.
because
Yeah,
children don't really have consent when
right.
they're in hospital and they're unwell. These things have to be done to them. So it's a way of them regaining their autonomy. It's very interesting
Yeah,
work.
yeah,
To have syringes, like the needles and stuff as well.
right.
So the puppets get a lot of injections and bandages around their heads and stuff as well. And it's a really nice thing to use real equipment too,
Mm.
because it just seems it's more interesting for the child, and
Yeah, yeah,
preparing them for procedures as well. It's really important to use
yeah.
real medical equipment too.
That's brilliant, Eimear. It's really fascinating to talk to you, and it's really, really interesting. And I really hope young parents who listen to the podcast will
Oh,
get an
me
idea of
too.
what is play therapy, because it's absolutely fascinating. So thank you very, very much for your time.
You're very
I'll
welcome.
put the detail of your website and all your Instagram on the at the end of the podcast. And
Brilliant.
yeah, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for your time, Miriam. It's lovely chatting to you.
See you too.
Thank you.